Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We are here on Skyfire TV back again. We've got a couple more faces today. So I'm Matt Sloan. I'm the CEO of Skyfire. We've also got Ben Kroll, who's the COO of Skyfire. And we are also joined by two great friends of ours. We've got Mike Bryant, who is the CEO of Skydis Group International, and Fritz Reber, who is the head of public safety for Skydio. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're really excited to have both of you guys on here. It's something we've been talking about for quite some time. So we appreciate you guys joining us.
Glad to be here.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about that little technical glitch there. Sorry.
All right. Hey, glad to be here, guys. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we are going to talk about drones and law enforcement, something we've talked a lot about in little bits over the course of these Facebook Lives, but something we wanted to dive into today. So let's just start by, if you would, Mike, just give us kind of a little bit of a background on you and how some of the stuff that we've been doing together.
Sure. I was, I guess, a really long time ago. I joined the Marines fresh out of high school, and from the Marine Corps, I went into law enforcement. After September 11th happened, I ended up working overseas for a whole bunch of years, and that's kind of where I got my introduction into drone use and to doing our missions. And when we first met, I was telling you, I just assumed that American law enforcement, for all the years that I was deployed, had been making use of drones. And when I got back, I found out that simply wasn't true. And then when you and I met, it was like, hey, this is a natural fit. So let's talk about how do we integrate those programs together. And well, the rest of it is kind of history. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. And for those of you who have taken any of our public safety or law enforcement tactical integration classes, they're co-taught by our staff and Mike and his staff, and just the value that you guys bring to the table, understanding from people who have actually been there in the field. We're the drone guys, but we're not SWAT guys, we're not law enforcement. So kind of sharing your expertise has been super helpful, I think, for the people who are taking our class. Fritz, you recently retired from Chula Vista Police Department, something we've talked about quite a bit here in their drone program on the Facebook webinar here. So you are now the head of public safety for Skydio. So talk to me a little bit about both of those hats that you wear.
Yeah, so for about the last 5 months, I've been with Skydio, helping public safety agencies learn how to use Skydio 2 and get product development feedback from them to make the next generation of drones that work for public safety. Like you said, I retired from Chula Vista in May of 2018, so now it's been a couple of years. When I was at the police department, I was the UAS team commander. I retired as a police captain. And during that time, I met Cabe Termes, who you guys know well from Cape, and we developed sort of a concept of operations that we thought we might beta test, sending drones off the roof to get ahead of officers on the ground, kind of do some scouting, as you guys well know. And coincidentally, the IPP was announced about 2 weeks after I retired. So
of course.
Yeah. So I came back, worked with Cape and Chula Vista as a consultant, and helped Vern Sully, who you also know, stand up the program and get it operational. I think they're going to cross 2,500 missions today when they're up and running. They're 7 days a week. So I worked with them for about a year. Met you guys in Florida at a convention during my consulting days. We stayed in touch. And then, of course, Cabe and I and Ben teamed up to write the BVOS waiver for DFR. So just been staying in touch with you guys ever since, looking at your great work, and glad to be here.
Oh, thanks. Well, we appreciate that. And
hey, Matt, can I just ask Fritz a quick question here? I just think this is really cool. Fritz, can you just talk just for a minute about, because we've talked a lot about drone as a first responder in DFR, and I've heard a few people affectionately call you the father of DFR. Can you kind of talk, like, where did that concept come from? Like, how was that born? I think that's kind of a quick story, a good story, if you don't mind sharing it briefly.
Yeah, I'll try not to go too far into the weeds. So I had developed with a partner of mine on the police department a kind of a scouting program. We were sending a plainclothes officer to get ahead of hot calls first. We were having some ambush issues in Texas, and we had a call that ended in a tragic death in a neighboring city and some riots. And so we knew that police officers tend to go call to call to call, and sometimes the uniforms aren't the best solution. So we're trying to find a way to strategize call response that, employed some problem solving before getting there. And then coincidentally, I met Cape Termez from Cape, who had the software, the teleoperation software that really shined a light on how you could use drones to do this. And it resonated with Cape because it was a lot of what Cape was doing in Jordan and just experimenting with in Mexico. So we developed the ConOps of drone as first responder. We have a progressive chief, Chief Roxana Kennedy. We thought we'd float that by her, and coincidentally the IPP was announced, which really kind of knocked down walls that might have otherwise been there. And once Chula Vista was selected, they jumped on board. Captain Vern Salih, who actually started the drone program and did all the groundwork that made it possible. I'm not sure he knew. It was a lot of foresight on his part to get community involvement and really get some solid buy-in in the community that made the idea of doing DFR a possibility. Without the community's acceptance and buy-in, you're not going to sell a program that innovative to them. So, and then of course he took the team back after I retired, and I worked closely with him and Chris Kelly, and then Don Redmond, and a lot of these other guys, Jim Horst, just a great team of people who are really doing fantastic work down there still.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's, really important when we, we'll start talking about some of the tactics here and how to get all this stuff working for you in reality and not just in concept. So Mike, I wanted to ask you if you could talk to us a little bit about, some of the stuff obviously within reason and the guidelines of, classified information, but I mean, some of the things that really made you realize when you were overseas that this technology was where it was at, and kind of what you saw when you came back from overseas.
Sure. For every mission that we had, we always had some type of overhead cover. And initially, we had, especially depending on the congressional delegation that was in town, you would have fixed wing aircraft and assets set aside. But as time went on, you had so many people there, the transition started going to drone technology, and that drone technology kind of realistically was a game changer for us, because the views that we've got, the time that the drones could stay in place over us, and for our particular mission sets, I'll be honest with you, we could have done the job without them, but it would have been incredibly much more difficult, because the things what drones do is they give you the tactical advantage. You never lose it, because you always have that view up into the sky as to what's happening all around you. And God forbid, if you had an emergency that occurred, you knew which was your best avenue to escape, your ingress routes. You could do all of your precursor mission planning and actually see what was happening down on the ground in real time without necessarily disclosing a whole lot of information. And for us, it was kind of a game changer. And as I mentioned earlier, I came back to the U.S. I'd assumed, kind of like the Vietnam era, when helicopters started making their use into American law enforcement, I figured it'd be a similar transition into American law enforcement. It just simply didn't exist. And one of the things that we found when we first started talking about this, and the public safety community, more directly the fire community, really embraced the use of drones, while law enforcement in and of itself is a litigious organization, just how it is. And yet, there are concerns that people had about privacy issue. And one of the things that I think we've done a great service together is found a way to mitigate that, especially with, if you got a drone program, you've got a video storage program as well. Those two have to go kind of hand in hand. But it just, Matt, you and I were talking a while back ago, and drones are as revolutionary to law enforcement as the handheld radio is. And you had made the reference that there was a reference to I think it was the fire hose you're talking about. And they literally are game changers. And the success story that's in Chula Vista is what I would call Exhibit A, as far as a program that's done right, that's integrating the drone programs into the three, we break down the three basic functions of what a drone is. And, it's limiting the liability that the officers face, because every time that, a drone goes out and can mitigate or resolve a problem, that's one less time that an officer has to go out and get involved in something. And, and apprehending people when necessary. Having the ability to track somebody, to me, that's just, it's a no-brainer. It's one of those critical use devices that I see with it.
Yeah, well, those are all really, really good points. And I think, what's cool about it, and having you guys here together today, this is a lot of the stuff that you guys realized in Chula Vista, and the big limitation for actually making any of that happen was waiting for somebody to drive the drone to the scene and getting stuck in traffic, just like every other first responding officer, and having to take the time to put the thing together and get it out of the car and get any waivers and all that kind of stuff. And so you guys sort of cut the middleman out of that out there, Fritz, and just said, what, while you guys are getting to the scene, we'll also have the drone en route too. So a lot of the things that Mike mentioned, having that situational awareness, you cut the time down on that tremendously. So what was that like when you guys first sort of realized what you had
in Chula Vista?
Yeah.
I think the idea is, you talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, I've always thought something like that, right? And the military's been doing it for years. It's just finding a system that worked where you could actually do it for public safety. Serving a community was the hard part of it. Seeing in action and seeing some of the calls that you get to, it is a game changer. Even if that call isn't, it doesn't really change the outcome of that call. Once you have that situational awareness, once you have that intelligence, even on your just average call, you don't want to go to calls without it. And that's what we saw with command staff and incident managers, watch commanders who had that live feed on their cell phone and could see where their officers were doing, how they were responding. It just gave them that much a better ability to manage each incident. There's been, many cases where it was a huge deal, where you could actually see it going wrong and actually someone losing a life when they might not otherwise, with the DFR program. So, and there's, video on their website and other videos that are around that highlight that. But I always kind of think that drones let you see the future, right? We've always kind of wanted to use drones. I first got interested in drones being a former SWAT guy, trying to use them for indoor tactical operations, right? Get ahead of a point on an entry team or something. I'm flying around my mini whoops all around the investigations at Chula Vista and bugging people and really trying to highlight the value of drones and the potential to see the future. And on the biggest scale, obviously, is to see the future on each and every incident every single day. And that's the ultimate goal at Chula Vista. They're up, exploring multiple sites to cover the entire city. They got a program in place to where eventually they can cover all days of the week, hours of the day. And it'll be an expectation that you'll have a view of what's going on at a scene before you get there as a first responder, both police and fire in that city. And I think that's something that, there's probably been 100, 150 actual visitors. I used to run tours with all the other guys there. We kind of split up the work and run tours from outside agencies, actually flying to Chula Vista and looking the operations in person. And it really turns on a light bulb about the potential. And we're just now seeing other agencies jumping in there. Clovis PD, Jim Monroe's running the program there. I know others like Santa Monica, who kind of been doing it for quite some time. I think even before Chula Vista, we're kind of doing some form of it. They're standing up a more formal program. Redondo, some of these other agencies are really innovative or are looking at that. And so I'm anxious for regulation to kind of step aside and let this be possible and then make it more scalable.
Yeah, and just to back that up, sorry, Matt, I just wanted to share something really quick. We talked a lot about how the data is super compelling. Like, you go to the website and you can really see it. I remember the first time that I went down there, I think you guys were having oh, cool, thanks, there you go.
Yeah.
You guys are having kind of a demo, and I think the FAA was out there, and I wasn't sure too much what this entailed or what this program was. And I think that's when I first met you, Fritz. It was almost a couple of years ago now. And I remember seeing that first demo and being in the watch commander's office and kind of watching how that went down. And I was so floored and blown away by it. Matt, I don't know if you remember this, but I stepped out into the hall and called you right away and was like, what they're doing here is incredible. I mean, this is game-changing type stuff. And it's just been backed up with the data.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, the numbers that you guys can see now. I mean, they've 2,496 calls that they've been to since 2018. 322 arrests that where the drone made an assist. This one, I think, this is always the one that I stick on. 589 times that a patrol officer didn't have to be dispatched because the drone was able to mitigate the call. Drone was first on scene in almost half the number of calls, and the average response time was 148 seconds. I mean, that blows my mind. I mean, Mike, you spend a lot of time policing. I mean, can you imagine
Yep.
having a first in officer there in 148 seconds?
I'd give my right arm for that back in the day. I can tell you that. I mean, that's, as Fritz was saying, it's just getting the ability to kind of to see the future with them. That to me is the critical decision point for anybody that's looking to get involved with the drone program. What type of resources that you need to allocate to this, what type of call that you have. If you've got, and as we're seeing a lot of proliferation of this, these ambushes on officers, if I've got a drone in the sky, I can see, potentially where I've got a bad guy at. And, it's something you can feed to the officers when they see that overhead feed. They can look at it and say, hey, I can do a quick lay of the land here. If I was going to conduct an ambush, where would I do it from? And that's, typically when you're responding to a call, and I hate to say this, but that's something that officers actually have to actively be cognizant of on even some of the most routine calls is this a call for service for some type of report, or is this something where I'm being set up from? And to me, every bit of data helps me do my job better. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're wanting to overwhelm the in-state user with all this information. It's just something that, there's a thing called heuristics where you can make snap judgments, and having the tactical over the lay of the land, you can really start taking very proactive steps to make sure that you stay safe. And the times that you've got a drone that's responding in that 148 seconds, and I can clear up that call, the calls where you have where someone is in physical danger, where you need to take life-saving steps, I'm not tied up with an unnecessary call, and that's a fantastic platform. And I just can't say enough about, again, what a game changer it is.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's light years ahead of where we were when we started doing this 6 years ago, when we were, duct taping GoPros to, anything that we could get in the air. I want to talk about equipment a little bit too, because Fritz, you guys have a very unique piece of equipment. But before we get into that, I want to talk about sort of the classes of equipment. So, Mike, you talked a lot about the Overwatch use, and this is what a lot of what the Drone as a First Responder program is doing, is an Overwatch capability. So, typically it's a bigger aircraft with a zoom camera, possibly thermal imaging camera, kind of a long range. Fritz, you already talked about the idea of using it, for SWAT calls. So, kind of flying inside of a house, tight quarters. So you're talking about something much smaller there. And neither one is better than the other. It's just a different use case. And so we have this conversation a lot with your clients about, bigger is not necessarily always better. It just depends on what you're actually using the aircraft for. So getting into specifics, Fritz, tell us a little bit about Skydio 2 and what makes that so much different than kind of really anything else out there on the market.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw it for the first time, I said this is a game changer. It really, as I said, my passion was tactical indoor flight, lower towards the ground level type of flight amongst obstacles, which took a lot of skill set. And seeing this, I thought, wow, this is a game changer. And DFR kind of sidetracked me. I got busy with that. And then when I saw this, it relit my passion to explore that. So working with them on this platform that they had developed, and kind of painting the picture of how public safety might use it is huge. If you don't know it, haven't seen it flying, and you see it, it's different. It really is an intelligent drone. It sees the world around it. I say it basically makes everyone an expert pilot, kind of becomes your VO, and you can really concentrate on looking what you're trying to look at rather than being worried about hitting things around the drone. So once you get below the tree line, any other drone, you kind of tread lightly, and you're looking at the drone and then looking at your camera. And, this drone frees you up to just be a cop, be a first responder,
right.
Do what you're good at doing, and flying safely in a challenging environment. It's still a work in progress, as we all know, and that work is underway at Skydio, which is very exciting, without getting too much in the details about what's coming next, but we're definitely in the early stages of some exciting stuff.
Yeah, I just kind of want to back up on what Rick is saying, especially on the tactical use of the drone. You know, there's basically three missions for drones. It's an Overwatch mission where you're covering down on the city. Your tactical operations, whether that's for a SWAT team or of course the daily use of going to determine whether or not you've got an active shooter somewhere that the first responders can look and see. And then you got your evidence collection, which that can be either post-crime or during a crime, whether it's an accident or whether it's you've got a homicide somewhere. We kind of break those down in our classes to those three basic operation modes. But the thing on the tactical side, that what we try and get our pilots to basically break away from looking at the drone as an object, but as a teammate that can travel really, really fast and cover a whole lot of space, and use some of the similar tactics that you've got, for clearing a building. And then once you get that transition from, hey, this is an object that I'm using as a tool, to, hey, wait a minute, this gives me the virtual capability to clear a building really quick, to mitigate a threat and be able to communicate with somebody. It's, like I said, it's game changing. So.
Yeah, Mike's hitting on a really important part about that layered approach, the different layers of ConOps, right? You have the Overwatch, which replaces kind of the historical manned air support, just an omnipresent view of a situation. But law enforcement quickly learned that there's a lot to see below the tree line, underneath canopies, be able to look directly into windows, open doors, which requires a horizontal view, not really a vertical view. So having a platform, normally it's multiple platforms, which I think you look at any robust team and they have a variety of platforms, but having a platform that's comfortable in both those environments, and then the third environment in terms of evidence collection, I think that would be huge.
Yeah, and I want to just kind of there's a little video here just on the website, on Skydio website, that I want to just bring up, because I think what's really so cool about the technology, is this obstacle avoidance, obstacle detection capability. A lot of drones have obstacle avoidance, but really adapt and overcome, I think, is what's kind of so cool about the Skydio. So like, if you can just kind of walk us through a little bit, like what we're seeing here on the screen. Obviously, this is an extreme sports example rather than a SWAT example, but this kind of shows you what it's doing.
Yeah, now you put me on the spot. I love listening to Adam.
You don't have to go into technical detail, just
engineers, it's like, being a cop and an operator, I'm in awe as much as anyone, but obviously the advanced robotic intelligence through software, where the drone basically sees the world around it much like we see it, and can predict where it needs to go, predict where the subject is going, and go there to really offer a brilliant cinematic experience, which, how does that translate into a public safety use case? We're still exploring that, but it's pretty exciting. And through the ERP program, which is the Emergency Response Drone Donation Program, a brainstorm of Brendan Groves, who's our head of regulatory and policy affairs at Skydio. He and Adam were discussing the idea of getting these drones out to help officers and firefighters, first responders in the field. So talking with them every day when they get these in their hands, and hearing from them how that type of intelligence helps them in their operations. It's not a game changer. It's not going to replace everyone's fleet. There are limitations, but it certainly has a spot in a full, robust public safety UAS team. But yeah, as you can see from that video, it does things that other drones don't do, and it really kind of makes your mind explore different ConOps and use cases.
Yeah, well, and I think to Mike's point too about using it as like another team member rather than, and as you said earlier, Fritz, let's focus on being cops and not flying drones. It's a combination of those two things. So you can have a flying team member that can do a lot of the intelligence stuff for you, so you can focus on the public safety mission, which I think is awesome. And I'll tell you, the first time, probably like everybody, the first time I got the Skydio out, now I'm like zigzagging around a parking lot, ducking beneath trees, and immediately trying to crash the thing, and I mean, it followed me like to an incredible degree of precision, which I thought was so so different than everything I had seen. So yeah, I think it's like you said, I definitely think it's a game changer. So Ben, I want to talk about from an FAA perspective. I think the biggest thing, first of all, to cover, difference between indoor and outdoor flying, because I think that's super important here. Oh, you're muted, bud.
And I always do that. Yeah, from when we talk about indoor and outdoor, it's actually pretty simple. We get this question a lot. As soon as you go indoors and you have a roof over your head, all that FAA stuff that we talk about in 107, all that goes out the window. Once you're indoors, the FAA does not have essentially jurisdiction over there to regulate that airspace inside. Once you're outside, obviously that's, then you've got to do 107 or public aircraft operations or COA, all that kind of stuff.
And then once you are outside, obviously we talked about the Overwatch mission. We've talked about, scene reconstruction and sort of the lower altitude stuff. What's, without, obviously we've done entire Facebook Lives on COAs and 107 and all that kind of stuff. But, what are some of the considerations as you're doing that?
Well, obviously, so if you're doing it, if we're talking about it for law enforcement, obviously, you do have to have some sort of certification for it. Whether that's Part 107, which is the civil certification, and that's a test. And again, like Matt said, we've got lots of Facebook Lives we've done on this. If you guys have any questions on the specifics, we're happy to answer those, or you can go back and watch. Or the other way is to be a public aircraft operator. There are a lot of agencies that do one or the other, a lot of agencies that do both. It sort of depends on your agency, your mission, your airspace, and kind of how all that comes together. Will inform which kind of regulatory route you need to take.
Now, I want to talk in that context about privacy, because that is not one of the things that's included in either Part 107 or COA. I want to, obviously, all four of us to comment on this. But does the FAA have any stance on privacy, private airspace above your house or your domicile or anything like that, or where does the FAA stand on that?
Yeah, I think I think the FAA says they regulate all airspace. And we'll see. You see a lot of state and kind of local governments sort of try to regulate some of that, but essentially, according to the FAA, all of the airspace is governed essentially by the FAA, and they don't really talk a whole lot about privacy and what that means, or what how much airspace do you, as a private citizen, own over their house. That stuff, to me, I think that we're going to see. There's going to be cases where that stuff gets challenged, and how much privacy can you expect over your home or around your property, those kinds of things. But we'll see. That's an unknown right now.
Yeah, I think that's the big question, right? Because the only Supreme Court case that deals with it is from 1928 or something like that. So
I think it was actually the 40s, and it didn't even really deal with it. It just, they kind of came up with an arbitrary number there of what someone kind of expected as far as the airspace above their home. So that stuff's all going to get challenged.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's probably an important evolution of the public safety drone industry. Fritz, you mentioned community involvement. So talk about that a little bit. Like, how did that work for you guys in Chula, and why is that so important, do you think?
Well, it's obviously important because that's the people you're serving, right? So whatever's good for the community is good for the police department, fire department.
Well, not everybody sees it that way, by the way, because we have police departments who are like, I don't want to tell them what I'm doing. This is a law enforcement tool. So
yeah, no, transparency was something that was really important to the chief and Vern Salih from the beginning. They set up a committee, invited people from the public. ACLU weighed in. Really, was an open process. They set up an email on their website, asked for public comment about how people felt about drone program, what their concerns were. They, developed a policy and put it out for review. And then, it took a long time and got buy-in before they bought the first drone, is what Captain Vern Salih likes to say. So by the time I got the team, that groundwork was laid. After we knew that once DFR was going, you're going to have drones overhead, every day, all day. That's kind of how the public's going to react to that. Certainly being part of the IPP was helpful because it was sort of a nationwide program, something special. But we really made an effort to be transparent from the beginning. You showed the data that they put out there. We're making videos, putting it out there, letting people see some of the content. We put out the policy in terms of how we manage the video, or how, when I say we, it's Chula Vista, I still say we, but how they manage the video, it just incorporating their existing body-worn camera system. They partnered with, actually at the convention, I think I met you guys. I met Robert Tabara from 911 Security. He was a great partner, and he and his team are putting the drone video up on the website so people can see where the drones flew, 1 or 2 day delay. So if you're worried about, it was at a police drone over my house, you'd be able to go and see the path of the flights and the reason for the flights. And that was key, right? Not just to fly, just to see if Chula Vista can find some crime, but responding only to calls for service, only 911 calls, only priority 1 and 2 calls.
Right, and I think that's a big key there that you just hit on, is the idea that you're not patrolling, you're not looking for crime using drones, you're just responding to existing 911 calls already and just doing it in a more efficient manner. Because I know we just saw, I guess it was 2 months ago, the city of Baltimore, is working on a program where they have airplanes flying over 24/7, collecting data, looking for crime. And I think, the ACLU was all over that. And I think, that program actually got put on hold. So that's one of the things I think that we need to be very specific about when we talk about drones in law enforcement, is like, we are not looking for crime using drones, at least at the moment. And that's something that may happen in the future, I think. And, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But for the time being, this is a reactionary tool. So, and
I just want to echo that, Matt, and kind of what Fritz said, how important that community engagement is. I think we've helped with drone programs in 30 some states. And so we've seen a lot successful, and we've seen a handful that have not been successful. And I would say one of the biggest things that I've seen causing a program to go under, or an agency stop using it, is because they haven't properly engaged the community. And we've seen a couple uproars and those kinds of things. So, and I love what Chula Vista PD did with that. I mean, they're sort of a model for how to engage a community like that. That to me is a huge part of this.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just saying this, that the actual model on how to get that community engagement involved with it is on the manned aviation side. You're giving a capability. Obviously, you're never going to have the ability to land people on the ground like a helicopter can. But as far as the aviation assets, the training programs, everything, the certifications, that template's already been laid, and if you're looking at getting involved with that, it's just something to have a look at. Because the mystique, you have to demystify what the drones are actually doing, and then show exactly what their capabilities are. And that's just my 2 cents.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think it's critical, because I think people have this idea that police officers are going to be looking in their windows and they're going to be zooming from miles and miles away, and that's just not the reality of the situation. In particular, one thing that I keep hearing that it cracks me up, although probably I would have thought the same thing before I knew better, was that thermal can see through my walls, and it's going to see where people are in my house. And not only can't thermal see through walls, it also can't see through windows or water. So people hey, you're going to look at my window, like the physics of thermal imaging are such that you cannot see through glass, because UV light doesn't come through glass. So I think that's been sort of a really interesting educational process. Like all of these things, I think education.
Yeah. And you think about, Matt, remember back like 5 years ago when we were out like doing these odd jobs, like filming stuff, right? I remember at the time when we first started, when you put a drone up, and I remember kind of thinking this when we were doing some filming on the beach out in California, and you put a drone up, everyone thinks that the drone is filming them. Right? Like you may have some other mission, right, that you're trying to conduct, but everyone on the ground a mile down the beach thinks that you're out there taking pictures, of them, when that's not really the case. So I just say that's an important thing, I think, to remember.
Yeah, well, it's all about me is sort of the fabric of our culture here in the US. So yeah, I it's funny because that's, I mean, a lot of the programs that are in place now for police departments center around that. Like, were you looking at me? And having the data to be able to say, no, in fact, I was not looking at you. Get over yourself. So, but I mean, I think it's an important conversation to have too, because there are some real security concerns there. So it's definitely something that you need to be focused on for sure. So what are some of the other use cases that we haven't talked about? Mike, what are some of the things that you've seen some of our clients working on and things where we wouldn't have thought to use a drone before?
Sure. I think what immediately comes to mind is accident reconstruction and clearing accidents. Especially if you have either a serious injury wreck or a fatal injury wreck. A lot of times to go and investigate that, it requires shutting down the roadway, and that impacts so many people when you shut down a major commerce, especially if it's an interstate highway or it's the main thoroughfare into some town or something like that. If you shut that down, that stops pretty much all the businesses from operating normally. That stops people from getting their jobs on time. All kinds of secondary and tertiary effects of that one accident. Well, what drones have done has basically cut anywhere from a 5 to 6 hour time of shutting down a roadway at a minimum to realistically getting it to between 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes. That to me is critical. I mean, that's a fantastic use for it, and that's just on the surface. Getting into, as we worked the Super Bowl a couple of years back, and seeing exactly how to use a drone, not only on the Overwatch portion of that, but on the tactical side of that, and being able to move people through and get first responders where they needed to be to make sure that we got almost 1 million plus people out in a timely fashion. That capability didn't exist, and it's as we said before, it's game changers. And what we find is that every day, because of the diversity of how law enforcement is, there is no call that's ever the same. You'll have some type of generic type of call, but each one has its own different and unique set of circumstances. And then as people are starting to use drones, they're starting to come up with ways of using a drone that we never expected to see it done. So,
yeah, we got stories all day long.
Oh yeah.
Good ones, most of which we can't share on this public forum. But one of the things that unfortunately have to bring up again, I feel like we're doing this pretty much every week now, is the data security concern. It came up again this past week. There's a new bill that was presented in the Senate by Senator McSally about preventing public safety agents or public agencies in general from buying Chinese-made aircraft. Fritz, what do you think? I mean, obviously you work for an American drone manufacturer, so you may have a different view on this. But I mean, what I've seen is, there are some real things to be concerned about, and then there are some things that I think are sort of a little bit alarmist too. I mean, one of the things, unfortunately, I think DJI was really trying to do the right thing and giving people equipment during this pandemic to try and help them, as you guys are as well. And it was sort of taken and twisted to, like the Chinese are giving out free drones so they can spy on us. And I think that's unfortunate. But I do think, we should be having the conversation, certainly, without the rhetoric. What's your take on that, Fritz?
Yeah, well, as you know, now I'm obviously biased, right? So certainly American made it eases a lot of concerns for the end user. I remember when we were standing up the DFR program in Chula Vista and going before city council meetings, et cetera, that was a very big question on a lot of people's minds. As that concern's been around for a while, and so having to address those answers with those questions, frankly, without the right answers, was a challenge. So certainly, just from the standpoint of avoiding those questions altogether, there's an advantage to avoiding these questions, right? Using a platform where that concern is going to be gone. So I don't know enough about the details. Certainly, Brendan speaks very well on this matter. That's something he's has a background, a lot of research and understanding from a high level of that concern. And I'm super supportive of the fact that Skydio is American made, and I get a lot of inquiries about that from the people I talk to. They do want an American made alternative. They're concerned about fleets being grounded at the stroke of a pen. So yeah, without diving too much deeper, that is a concern in a lot of ways. Even if it's just perception is reality.
Well, and I think that's exactly the case. I mean, I think perception is definitely reality. And as you mentioned, Brendan, you're referring to Brendan Schulman, I'm assuming, from DJI, who has done a really good job, putting forward the information about this is what DJI is and isn't doing. And whether or not these concerns are founded, people just aren't listening. Some people aren't listening. Other people, that makes them feel better. And certainly, I think, to the extent that any private company can be transparent about it, I think DJI, at least recently, has done a good job of being transparent about it. But I think there's just some people that's not good enough. And I think that's whether that's founded or unfounded is sort of irrelevant, because as you said, perception is reality. And when people are being told you can't buy Chinese, it doesn't really matter what their opinion is,
Yeah.
And
just to correct, I was talking about Brendan Groves.
Oh, okay.
Associate Attorney General, DOJ, now at Skydio, head of Regulatory and Policy Affairs. But the comments you made about Brendan Schulman's and others is correct. It's a concern.
Yeah, well, that's going to get super confusing since they're both named Brendan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But apparently all drone policy guys should be named Brendan going forward.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, I appreciate the clarification there. So, Ben, this is something you've been diving into recently too. I mean, what are you seeing? Anything new that you found out on the data security?
Not really. I mean, lately I've been kind of trying to get into some of the details with it, and some of like you said, trying to figure out what is accurate and what's not, and what's opinion, and what's hyperbole and all that stuff. I've found that a little bit difficult to kind of wade through. But we're continuing to do it. It's something we talk about, every day, and continuing to learn more. So I don't know. It's a good question.
And I would say on a related front there too, having the ability, as Mike said earlier, to have the data backup. So when it does go to court, when somebody does ask a Freedom of Information Act question, you have the ability to say, this is exactly what we were looking at. This is exactly what we were not looking at. We were not looking in your window. We were in fact looking at the carjacking that was happening across the street.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk a little bit about that, Mike, from a software standpoint?
Yeah, sure. I'm a huge fan of DroneSense. Their software, to me, it's fantastic. And as I mentioned when we first started talking, law enforcement by its very nature is litigious. I wish it weren't so, but it's kind of the checks and balances that we as society have kind of adopted. But having the ability for to go to court, and if someone wants to know exactly what your pilot was doing, what he was seeing, or he was seeing what they were doing, what the capabilities of the camera system was, the telemetry of the flight, how long it spent over one spot, and you're always going to have someone who's going to believe the worst, and having the ability to say and play on a screen and show you exactly what that drone saw, and how long that camera actually gazed across their property. Someone says, well, it was above my house for almost 20 minutes. That may in fact be true. However, its camera went across your house for 0.045 seconds or whatever it took for it to change its position. That's huge. And it completely mitigates, the ability for someone to say that you're using the drone for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely critical, and I think that's one of the reasons. Going back to Chula Vista, all this data that I showed earlier is actually on a public website. So it's chulavista.ca.gov. You just Google Chula Vista drone program, and it'll show you all that data. And the effort there is to be transparent, to say, like, we're not trying to hide anything. We're actually using this for exactly what we told you we were using it for. Fritz, were you part of that decision to put that stuff out publicly, or how did that? Because that's pretty unusual to see that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was part of that conversation and how to do that, and a lot of the content on the website I was the only one that had time to do that. So that's
you were voluntold. Yeah,
Vern and the team is to put that stuff together. But it's been part of Vern's vision that was clear from the beginning, and a lot of the nuts and bolts were just the team doing what they could to put that data out, right? So they're constantly thinking and rethinking of how much they can share, because there's a responsibility to keep some of that private. I was frankly pushing for releasing more of the video and letting people really see the benefit of it, but you have to balance that with people with concerns that, hey, I don't want to show up in some video that's on a public website. So releasing enough to be transparent and keeping enough close to the vest to show respect for privacy was a constant balance that we all
Yep.
had long discussions, very frequently over that year and a half of standing up the program.
Yep.
And I'm sure they're ongoing now.
Yeah, and you've also got to balance that with evidentiary requirements as well. There are certain things that you're going to film that are inherent, specifically for the prosecution of a case successfully, and you definitely don't want that to be a public disclosure.
Yeah, not a small point there for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So in terms of next steps, in terms of regulation, I kind of maybe, I don't know how much time we have. Shift gear, kind of love your input from a regulatory standpoint, and Mike's input from a tactical end user standpoint is obviously the DFR relies on regulatory permissions related to beyond visual line of sight and flight over people, but below the tree line operations, we see needing close proximity, low altitude CPLA permissions where you can fly beyond visual line of sight, not so much because it's so far away you can't see it, but because it's behind a tree or down over an embankment or behind a house. Really pushing that concept that kind of came to light when I saw Skydio, where it could actually fly and see the world around it, and kind of freeing you to put it places that you can't see, and then exploring that idea, hearing that something similar like that was crafted by Chris Sadler out in York County, and then working on that ability, that capability at Chula Vista, who has it based on their existing one. And then talking with Brendan Groves, who it paralleled a lot of the work that he's done in the past, so he's pushing that. We're talking with the FAA, trying to get that waiver going. So want to know, you guys have heard of that, what your thoughts are, and what kind of use cases that open up.
Yeah, that's so. Fritz, you probably know more about CPLA than I do, just with some of the work that you've been doing on it. And then I know that there are a few people around the country that are applying for that close proximity, low altitude. So it's a different ConOps, right? I mean, the concept is different, right? So that instead of the drone being like a kind of an overwatch and being flown out to the scene, the drone is with the responder, right? And the idea is that they can take it out and they can quickly put it up, and it can go beyond their visual line of sight within a certain distance, right? Do I have that? Is that kind of how that works? Okay. So it's limited by distance and it's limited by altitude. I've heard that there are a few of these that are about to get approved. I don't know. I personally haven't talked to anybody in the FAA about this particular, the CPLA stuff. But it seems like it's another tool. If we can get kind of past that regulatory hurdle, that's something that for an officer showing up on scene that just needs that quick look. I think that's really cool. I think it can be done safely and done, with the proper mitigations. But again, it's the FAA, and we don't really know until they say, okay, yeah, you have proven that you can do this safely, and and go for it. So I'm hoping, that this is something that really has some legs, because it's just another tool, another operational tool, another concept of operations that I think could really help.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the use cases Mike was describing too. Get opened up because it seems like regulations is the biggest barrier to drone use now in terms of the next level. Doing that.
Especially, you were talking about it, agencies that are, especially like in Georgia, around Atlanta, so many, Atlanta's a forest, right? Mm-hmm. It without being able to do that, a lot of times it just, it makes it's not a tool worth using in a lot of situations because of that.
Well, and frankly, even getting it to, if you're planning on flying inside, you have to still get it there from outside. And there's places where, from a tactical perspective, you wouldn't want your Bearcat to be in a certain place, but that's where you would need to be if you wanted your drone to get to the front door. So, I mean, that, it's tactical limitations that are really making stuff like that, more applicable. And I think, that's something that the FAA is going to need to address at some point. We're not talking about flying 400 feet, 6 miles away in controlled airspace. We're talking about, as Fritz said, under the trees, 50 feet off the ground. And as far as the regulations are concerned, there is no difference between those two things.
Right.
Well, for once, we don't have any questions from the audience, guys. So, I even asked if there were any, but a couple of hellos from our buddy Larry Bogus down in Texas, and of course, Mr. Mustachio himself, Mike Masserino, our buddy from Darley, and hello to Nathan Gallup as well. Thank you guys all for dropping by and saying hello. And I don't. Oh yeah, there we go. All right. Well, Larry commented just now. He was talking about alarm calls where you need to go see the back of a house to check for open doors. Yeah, you're immediately out of line of sight at that point, and certainly not putting airplanes in danger at 20 feet off the ground. So
yeah, I think that is causing a lot of discomfort when agencies have to choose between safety and regulations, and clarifying that will be a huge sigh of relief, I think. So hopefully we'll see some success there.
Well, right. we'll keep ringing the bell. So that's all we can do from the Skyfire perspective. We'll ring the bell as loud as we can. So
all right, yeah, I hope that's cleared up quickly as possible. We just, an event we were working, actually it was on a counter drone format, but having the ability to send the guy who was responding and to tell him how many people were behind the house as he was pulling up. Remember that event, man?
Yeah.
That to me was that made the case for the reason why you need something like this.
Yeah. I think, just having flexibility, I think is what it's all about. And so, the more that this evolves, I mean, look, when we first started doing this 6 years ago, you had to have an FAA, aviation medical exam to be able to fly a drone. You had to have a commercial pilot's license, so, I mean, things are changing, things are evolving, and we've certainly seen a lot of things. Chula Vista being, the drone as a first responder BVLOS authorization. I mean, that was a massive step forward. And so, things are definitely evolving, and I think we'll get there. It's just taking some time. So
yeah, I agree. It's just one of the things where technology is so outpaced what the regulatory stance is, and it's just a matter of having worked in government agencies. And Fritz, I think you can compare with this. You're trying to turn a battleship, not a little speedboat.
Right.
That's just the reality of what it is.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, I think we can call it there, guys, unless there's anything else any of you guys wanted to jump in and offer.
Thanks for inviting us. It's been great.
Same here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thank you guys all for being here. It's always good to have more than just me and Ben on here talking about stuff and getting some real world application. So big thanks to Mike Bryant, CEO of Skydis Group, and Fritz Reber, the head of public safety for Skydio and former captain of Chula Vista Police Department. Thank you guys both for being here. We really appreciate it. And to those of you who are out in the field protecting us every single day, particularly during this pandemic and these crazy times that we find ourselves, certainly very appreciative from all of us. And thanks for doing all the work you're doing. So thank you guys all for watching and joining us. If you guys have any questions on any of this stuff, feel free to comment, email, send us a tweet, shoot us a phone call, any of those things here on Facebook. And still, same as last week, we are not yet on TikTok, so don't send us a TikTok. But thank you guys all for watching. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
I hope everyone had a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me.